Welcome to Change Geek, where I share content that will impact and change your life for greater personal growth. Last time we talked about the toxic bosses and how to survive them, and I thought I'd do a follow-up and explain the gender differences between sociopathic bosses, and also explain the differences in more detail between sociopaths and psychopaths. And I think the way that you'll see it illustrated will kind of give you a lot of clarity on what that is. Real quick review. What is the definition of a toxic boss? It's someone who mistreats their employees by continuously crossing personal or professional boundaries with little or no consciousness or a lack of consciousness of their wrongdoing. So if I talk about the differences of gender when I think of sociopathic bosses in the business enterprise or at your job, right? If you look on the left side of the illustration, you'll see for men, they are very controlling via overt attacks. They usually display physical positioning and posturing that's much more aggressive. And their default is always that. Their default when they're posturing for sociopathic dysfunctions with their employees or with their peers, it's usually physical messages of dominance. That's their complete default position because it's about control, right? And the other obvious thing that we'll see with men sociopaths is that they're very blatantly intimidating. It's just very obviously intimidating. And then if you look on the right side, if you look at women that are sociopathic bosses in the workplace, they're manipulative via covert attacks. So covert is different, meaning they're very much more hidden about things, more secretive, more manipulative about it. Their default is verbal attacks and emotional abuse. Emotional abuse, playing some games in the mind as well. They often blame others. They often play the victim, like, oh, this always happens to me. And when they take that victim position, it allows you to have your vulnerabilities down, and then they can be more manipulative. And then the verbal attacks and emotional abuse comes into place. They also do a lot of relational attacks. I thought that was really interesting to find from several psychologists that I've read. Relational attacks mean they take the relationship, make it vulnerable, and then they ridicule you at vulnerable points that you have, or at vulnerable moments in your workplace life, right? Also, the relational attacks is there's a little bit of, how shall I say, underlying seduction that you can often see. And I'm not saying that every sociopathic boss is like this. I'm saying it is very commonly seen, and there's varying degrees of each of these symptoms with both male and female. As with anybody, that it varies. There's a varying degree of that, but these are the common themes that you'll see. Research shows that there are actually more male sociopaths than females. And I'm going to debate this, however, because women are typically harder to detect as sociopaths. They usually have more covert aggressions that I mentioned prior, meaning that the aggression is not very direct. It's not transparent. And it's often done what I call through webs of manipulation, which initially cause the receiving end person to second guess constantly the self-doubt. And I call that the erosion of the self, which is one of the goals of a toxic boss, is to have control over you or control of the circumstance or the department or the situation. Default is that they're self-absorbed, which means they're very focused on promoting themselves, and they will use your head as a footstool to get where they want to. They use your hard work to get where they want to. And I call this the push ladder effect. Push ladder effect means they're pushing you down so they can climb the ladder over you and your hard work. So something to consider. I know it's a busy chart, but I don't know how else to show it to you in one picture, the difference between sociopathic versus psychopathic bosses. So I thought I'd show you in a Venn diagram. So you look on the left, and you see psychopaths, they have no consciousness of wrongdoing, right? They have high-risk behaviors, and they don't follow the rules and the laws, right? No, they don't follow them consistently. And they have violent behaviors, as I've mentioned prior. They actually are a small percentage of the population. It's about 1% of the population. And then on the far right side, I'm going to talk about the sociopaths. And sociopaths have a low consciousness of wrongdoing. I'm not saying that they don't have it. They have a consciousness of wrongdoing, but it's very, very low. It's kind of like some background noise, but just keep doing that abusive behavior, right? They often blame others for their circumstance or their situation to leverage that, and then to take actively manipulative actions against others. I mentioned they play victim. They're about 4% of the population, so you see that a higher percentage. They also tend to be more dominant in certain markets and industries where that behavior is more acceptable, such as, I'll give you a really clear example, like in the entertainment industry or in politics. So, and if we look at psychopaths and sociopaths and we say, well, what do they have in common? They are excessively controlling. Both of them lack empathy. Both of them are inconsistent in their actions and behaviors. And both of them lack a right versus wrong. And believe it or not, both of them are charming and some are very attractive. And all of them display narcissistic traits. So, and if you look at the narcissistic traits, that goes back into the psychological displacement that I talked about in my prior video on toxic bosses in the workplace. That psychological displacement not only includes narcissism, but also other sociopathic disorders like bipolar personality. So if you have any comments you'd like to share about this topic, please comment below, like the content, and don't forget to click that subscribe button. Appreciate it so much. Thank you.